Hello and welcome to Chess with Ivan. If you enjoy not just playing chess but also winning, this video is for you. Today I'm going to teach you how to give checkmate using the queen and another piece to support the queen. Even though the queen is the strongest piece in the chess set, it cannot give checkmate on its own. So it needs support from one of its own pieces, or it needs other pieces to be blocking the enemy king. But when it's just our queen versus their king, the queen on her own cannot give checkmate. So I am going to go through some basic examples of how do we do that, and then we're going to look at a few interesting examples as to why this will improve a lot your chess game, and also some real game examples. So in the examples that we're going to look at today, the queen will be delivering checkmate when it goes right in front of the king. Hence the fancy sounding term for this type of checkmate, which is the kiss of death. Let's take a very basic example. Here we have two kings on the board and the white side has a queen. Hopefully that's us and we should be winning this game. But if we don't know what the technique is, then we might play for many moves and even risk getting into a position called stalemate, which means a draw. So the best way to win in the position that you're seeing here on my side, I don't know, left or right, is to come right in front of the king using our queen on this diagonal and deliver checkmate. So why is this checkmate? First of all, it is check, which is the first prerequisite to a position being a checkmate. The black king is attacked by our queen, and all the squares that the king can move to are also attacked by the queen, which means the black king can't escape. This square b4 is also defended by the king, and our queen itself is defended by the king. This is why I was saying earlier that the queen on its own cannot do this type of checkmate, because if it's not defended, it's not supported by one of our pieces, then it will simply be taken by the black king. So this is the kiss of death in its most basic form, where the black king on its own at the end of the game is checkmated with the support of our king, and the queen is used to deliver the checkmate. And this is one situation that can arise very often. That's why I think this video will be quite useful to people who are starting out with chess and get into an endgame situation where they're winning but they're not sure of the technique how to win. For example, if we are clearly winning but the black king is still in the center of the board, we cannot give this checkmate, but it is very good to have a look at this position in order to understand why the kiss of death is the way, or one of the ways to win the game with white. But first let's understand why this even is the right technique. So if we're in the center of the board and we give a check with our queen with the same technique, again here the queen is right in front of the king, and this is not checkmate, because if we look at the options for black, what can they play at the moment? They can go sort of backwards and sideways. These are squares that the black king can go to, since the queen does not have the range to cover them. It covers all the other squares that the black king can go to, and itself it is protected by the king, so that's another square where the black king cannot go. However, these squares are an option, and the game continues by black sort of sidestepping this check. So if we want to trap the black king, obviously we want it to go further away from the center and closer to the board, because the reality is that if the black king is at the very back, then we don't have any more squares to go back to. So this is why this would be checkmate. So let's just align things nicely to explain. This is, let's say, a position that you might get in one of your games, and here you can give checkmate via the kiss of death, which is coming here to b7. And notice how the king would like to go back to a square, let's say we have 8 rows. If there was a 9th row, they can go to A9 somewhere here outside of the screen, or C9, but those squares don't exist. So once you got the king on the back rank in the end game, that's when you can deliver this type of checkmate and make sure you win the game. As you get more experienced, you will know that there are other checkmates that exist as well, but this is the safest and kind of the most principled way of winning the game, with a king and a queen against a king. Now, another reason why this happens very often is probably not too often you will be winning by a full queen when you reach this situation. But often you might have had a very tight game and you only had one extra pawn. And as you may know, the pawns can turn into queens once they reach the last rank. So that's when you get the situation of a white king and queen versus a black king, or vice versa if you're playing black. So knowing how to win from this position is important for not just the games which end up with those pieces, but also all the games where you're going to have one more pawn than your opponent. So you had a tight game, but then that pawn turned into a queen, and then you can execute a very easy finish if your opponent is still playing on and not giving up. So this is the basics. I hope you understood it, but I want to point out that there is no need for the other piece to be a king. So if we look at another example, again this is simplified, probably there should be more pieces on the chessboard, but let's say that in this position we want to give checkmate in one move. Knowing what you know about the kiss of death, you can have a think where the queen goes and which is the fastest way of winning. And the correct answer is B7, because going here traps the king, which is in the corner on the last rank, and it cannot escape anywhere. So the queen kind of gives him a nice poisonous kiss, and it's game over. Here the queen is supported by the rook. So again, the king cannot take the queen from this kiss of death situation because it is supported by something. That's an example how to do it with a queen and a rook. Now, here it's black's move. Black might sense that there is some threat, but if they're not playing carefully and don't actually deal with the threat, they will succumb to a kiss of death situation. So black might notice that white is attacking with 2 pieces the square h7, a great square for a kiss of death situation, and a very common square in real games, because often, as white and black, we castle and our king is in the corner. It is quite safe there, that's why we castle in the first place. There is pawns around you, there is rooks protecting you, but still, if you're not careful and if you allow your opponent to pile on a lot of pressure for one of your pawn's squares, then you might get in trouble. So if you're black here and you kind of want to kick out that knight and play the move h6 to h7, h7 to h6, sorry, then you did not really deal with the immediate threat of the fact that 2 pieces are attacking that square. So white will be able to still win with a kiss of death type of mate. Instead, if you want to defend this situation by moving a pawn, you should move this pawn, the G line pawn. This pawn breaks the attack between the queen and h7, which will allow the game to continue in a different way, and you will survive for more than one move. So these are kind of important situations when in a real game you should be looking for a kiss of death kind of checkmate. And as a defender, you should notice the signs that pieces, including the enemy's queen, are starting to stare at your king. So this is an example where the knight is the supporting piece, which allows the queen to give a checkmate. And just a quick note, even a pawn can be quite strong in delivering this type of checkmate. So here, white to move and give checkmate. One way would be to go here with the queen, because this rank will be covered, and the white king, the black king cannot go forward due to its own pawns and our pawn here. So there is more than one way to give checkmate. But in a real game, that move is not often available, because usually there is a rook here, there might be a rook here, there might be other pieces that are covering this square, and it's not like your last rank is rarely like a free rank. So that's why we want to approach from a different angle, in this case using our pawn and our queen to form a powerful combination, giving you the chance to give a kiss of death with checkmate. So we saw that all sorts of pieces can support our queen, and I think that an important thing to understand about this is it's useful to scan for opportunities of doing this kind of checkmate at the start of the game, in the middle of the game, and also in the end game, because having your opponent dealing with your threats will result in two things. One, they will not deal properly with it and you will win on the spot. It's a direct checkmate if you manage to land it without any further complications. Or two, that will distract your opponent from other threats that you are making. So for example, here you are threatening this, and if at the same time there was, like, let's say some piece here that is free to take by your queen, your opponent really needs to deal with the problems that they have on g7, because otherwise the game will end. So they might need to think of what piece can I possibly put somewhere in order to prevent that. Like, they might want to put a bishop here or a queen there or a knight on this square that can defend like that. So in the meantime you will be able to execute a lesser threat, like taking, let's say, another piece or pawn or whatever, and this way you will slowly win the game. Like, having this threat in your arsenal is very important in order to keep developing and keeping your opponent busy with lesser threats that you can then act on. Let's look at some examples. So one of the most basic traps in chess is the so-called scholar's mate. It arises from the very common moves e4 and e5. Then you move your bishop to c4, and your opponent might play a typically normal and perfect move like knight to c6, and then you come here to h5 aggressively with the queen. Now, a good player will be able to defend this, but if your opponent is distracted and want to just simply chase away your queen, they'll play knight to f6, and then you can act on the threat of a kiss of death, winning on the fourth move with queen to f7 checkmate. This time we use the bishop in order to support our queen. So that is not what I advise you to do, except maybe a few times just to see that it works for yourself and win a few games against basically someone who is just starting out to play chess. You won't win many games like that, but the principle is important. Knowing that this is a possibility will allow you in more developed game situations to make threats and force your opponent to defend. And finally, if you're still not convinced, you need to know this. Even if you're the richest man in the world, you should have known this. This is an example of a game played between Bill Gates and Magnus Carlsen, the world champion. So it was an exhibition, I think, in a talk show, and Magnus Carlsen was the black pieces. He had 30 seconds for the game, so he needed to act fast and mounted an attack that wasn't very good moves if your opponent is really good. But nevertheless, it will prove to be too much for Bill Gates, who is white pieces here. Here Bill decided to take this knight, which looks like an excellent move, because you take a knight, you open an attack on this knight, and if that knight recaptures that knight, sorry, I'm saying knight too many times, but hopefully the arrow will make it a bit clearer, or probably they aren't. But basically, if these two knights are gone, then Magnus can lose his queen, and Bill can capture his queen because these knights will be gone. So in a game, Bill played knight takes e5, and he may have been hoping that Magnus would play a move like that to win his queen, but Magnus is the world champion, so when presented the opportunity, he gave Bill Gates a swift kiss of death, and he was a bit shocked, but he laughed about it, so good sport, Bill Gates. And that's everything I wanted to mention in this part one of the first checkmates I would like you to know. In the next video of the series, I will talk about how to checkmate the king on the back rank, and I'll give you some good examples about that. Good luck. Checkmate at least one person online or in real life with this type of checkmate, and let me know in the comments. Thanks guys. Bye.